I don't know, there have been a number of you who said that you want to see me getting out and doing different things. And right now, while I'm stuck at home, getting out, little tricky to do. So here's something a little bit different. Hello there and welcome to another Friday night. We're still getting in that direction of what can be finally another beautiful Friday night, but in the meantime, I'm still on lockdown. But today is one of those days that I have a lot that I need to get done. I need to make a video for Friday night, and then I'm also doing an interview today, plus a whole bunch of other things that I just need to get taken care of. But there's a couple things that have popped up recently. On one of my posts recently, I can't remember exactly who asked it on Facebook. Maybe it was David from David's Dose of Italy. Said, what are you doing about a haircut during this time? And it's something I've actually not been too worried about. But I've also been getting questions from people, like my email box is packed to the max. And at this point, it's been so difficult for me to keep track of any messages on Facebook or email that it's just, as soon as I see a message, by the time I open up my box again, it's completely buried under the other. So if you've sent me a message recently and I haven't responded to you, I am so sorry. But I did get a message from a young man named Ben, who I believe is living in the UK. He sent me a message on Instagram and I was able to screenshot that before that message was completely lost. And he said, "Hi Rafael, I'm playing with the idea of moving to Italy, and the main thing I would move there for is the weather, the lakes, the mountains, and the culture. The general warmth of Italy. I've been to a place called Stresa on holiday, and I was just wondering your opinion on Stresa and what it would be like as a permanent place to live for an 18-year-old starting out life, and I want to have a sustainable income and an Italian citizenship, also learn the language." So Stresa, I've actually been to. A lot of times I will get messages from people naming very small Italian towns that I've never heard of before. But Stresa is actually one place I've been to. And it's a nice little town. It's a great place to go on vacation. But as a young person who's just getting started out in life, I don't think it's quite the best place to go to. And I wanted to respond to this question, but like I said, I have a lot that I need to get done today, so I'm gonna cut my hair and try to record a video at the same time. Not sure how this will work. I'm kind of needing to try to shake things up because there's only so much that you can do from your home without kind of going a little bonkers. You gotta keep things interesting one way or another. Of course though, before I get into all of that, a huge thank you to those of you who've been helping to make me make videos even like this on a monthly basis on Patreon. So a huge thank you to you guys. So let's get started with this. I think it's called a Get Ready With Me. I don't know. I'm not into the whole beauty side of YouTube. Let me grab my clippers. Alright, so if you're wanting to learn how to cut your hair on your own, it's actually really easy. I started getting into it because every time I went for a haircut, I always got horrible results and I didn't get what I was asking for. Even once I figured out with the language barrier in the country that I was living in at the time, how to explain what I wanted, nobody would do it for me. Even though the guy cutting my hair, more often than not, and I went to a number of different people, had what I was looking for, they would never quite do it for me. But after a number of moves and just things, I've had to get a couple different pairs. These are Val 200 series. I guess it's an American brand, so maybe it's Wal, not Val. Anyway, these are simple clippers. They're not expensive. You don't need anything so fancy, especially if you're not making a living from cutting hair. But if you're doing it, like I mostly cut my hair. Sometimes I get a little bit of help with the back here just because to get this line is a little tricky, but I've done this trick where I've kind of done this sort of on my own. But I also have an electric razor that sometimes I will use to help kind of do the last little bit of finishing up just in the back here. But anyway, this is kind of my process with the two. Anyway, but about moving to Stresa, this is one of those things where this was kind of what I actually went through when I moved to Alto Adige. But I also moved to Alto Adige having in mind that I need to work and make a living. And in a place like Stresa, it's going to be a bit difficult, not only from a financial side, but also when you start thinking from the social side. My experience of the place was that it was very similar to Alto Adige, where it was more a type of place where you go on vacation rather than where you can really live and make a life for yourself if you're just starting out. By the way, I am just starting out with the longest guard that comes with this. It's a number 4 1/2 inch 13 millimeter guard. And I actually did speak a little bit more with Ben after he sent that original message, and he explained that he wants to become a football or soccer coach. I believe he's from the UK. And one thing, I don't know if it exists in the UK the same way it does in the US, but school sports, you have a little bit of it here in Italy, but it's not like as prevalent as you would in the States. Like, or you don't have football games against the rival team, and there's not like these statewide leagues that kids will play in, or high school kids, I guess. And something I forgot to mention was to put something down, because this gets messy, and you'll need to take a shower after this, because it'll all... Usually I do it without a shirt on, but Mama didn't raise no nudist, so that's why I've got a shirt on for the video. But going to a place because it's beautiful, it's tricky. There's on one sense where it's great for you for your mental health, but to be in a place that you love can really have a great effect on how you feel about life, how you feel about things. But after a while, if you can't make a living in a beautiful place, the beauty very quickly starts turning into a beast, so to speak. And so it can become something that kind of stares back at you in the face and almost taunts you. As a young person who's kind of getting started in their life, if I were to do this all over again, if we were to roll this back 10 years and I were to start looking at what I would do if I were to do this all over again, if I were to move to Italy at a younger age, because I moved here at 25? Hold on, 3 years? Yeah, so about 25. And I'm 28 now. So if I were to have moved here at 18, which is something I really do wish I had done or had been able to do, because if I had gotten my citizenship younger, I would have moved here a lot sooner. That was my original plan, but that didn't end up happening. So I ended up going around the world a little bit before finally landing here and giving up the business that I had built elsewhere. What I did learn in Alto Adige was that while I did really love the way that it looked there, the way that it was, getting a job there was very difficult, and that's supposed to be one of the easiest places to get a job in Italy. And that in Italy is supposed to be the place with the lowest unemployment rate, and it may actually be the place in Europe that does have the lowest unemployment rate. But this gets into a different kind of issue, is the language. There you need both German and Italian. If you have just Italian, you speak that really well, you can maybe get by there, but if you really want to get a nicer job there, you need to know not just German, but their dialect of it. And some people there actually will get offended if you try and learn their dialect. It's a very strange thing. Not everybody is like that. Some people will be very impressed when you try to bust out a little bit of dialect. But there are also people there that say that we don't want people learning our dialect. We want to be our own. We want to just very isolationist. I realize that word has a negative connotation with it, but there's reasons why that they kind of want to be on their own. But in another place like Stresa, where it is Italy, where they do speak Italian, what you'll find is that getting a job there in such a small place may become difficult, and you'll probably end up having to work in the tourism industry, because there's not too much else, unless, I'm not saying specifically Stresa, but in places like Stresa, there's not much more happening other than tourism. So while you're just getting started, you'll need to get a job as like a waiter or working in a hotel or something along these lines. And just as a kind of a little side note, I don't usually cut the top of my hair. I'll go like once or twice, maybe 3 times a year, to somebody who actually knows what they're doing to get the top cut, because that I trust a little bit more somebody else to do, but the sides, it's so easy to do, and I get it the way that I like it, so I just do it myself. Now I'm moving down to a 3, which is, 3/8 of an inch or 10 millimeters. And you don't go up as high, you kind of work your way down. There's a lot of videos on YouTube showing people, like if you want to like really find somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to this, there's plenty of videos like that on YouTube, but I just this is how I do it. I work my way down. Some people make like a thick line and they do like an undercut, but I just work my way down. But socially, moving to Italy, if you're the type of person who does like to stay home and spend a lot of time at home, that's one thing. But if you're the type of person that needs a lot of social activities, you need to be very lively, you need to like get out there and have a good time, then moving to a small town may not be the right choice for you. But even for people who are young, you kind of need to think about where you can make a living, and that might not be in a tourist destination. Making a living from a fun little tourist town isn't quite the easiest thing to do unless you're in that industry or trying to get into that industry. If I were to consider the same thing, and I am somebody who does enjoy being at home, but working is necessary for me. So what I would think about is maybe a place like Verona, if you're not wanting to go to a place that's so big like Milan, and be able to maybe have a better chance of getting into like sports professionally. But here in Italy, as well as Europe, this is kind of like a kid's dream to get into this field. So it's going to be very competitive. So you'll need not only like a good education in the field, but you'll also need a good name for yourself. You'll need some good experience and the language. Don't forget the language. That's going to be one of the things that will really make the final difference. But then, of course, if you're from a non-European Union nation, which because of Brexit, now the UK is on their way out. I guess it'll depend, of course, on the final deal that's reached and the final agreements. But if the new situation for people from the UK is similar to what people from the US would need to do for working here in Italy, it would be necessary to get a visa before even moving here. So that means you basically have to have a work contract. I think you would be able to come here on a quick trip to start looking for a job, but a lot of people won't want to hire you in Italy unless you're actually legal to work in the country. So that's going to be a huge uphill battle. This is one advantage, that if you are of Italian descent, that you will have that easier way of getting in the country, but otherwise it's a big uphill battle. There is an advantage that if you are younger and if you do learn some Italian, you could go to university here, which might give you a little bit of an advantage in comparison to somebody who maybe went to university elsewhere. There's benefits and drawbacks to going to university here and then looking for work here. If you're from abroad, they might look at it as a big advantage that you did go to university here, whereas if you are from Italy and you did go to university in Italy, they might look at you a little bit differently. But the other thing to consider is that a lot of people are very highly educated in this country, and even then they still can't get jobs. So this is also, of course, under the consideration that we are going through a really horrible situation right now in the world, and what are things going to look like afterwards is very much an unknown. So what's the best way of moving forward will depend on the coming months and seeing what really happens. So this is all under the assumption that things go back to some form of normal. But as a young person, you also have to think about what's going to be your competitive advantage. What is the thing that you are going to use about where you're from, your unique personality, your particular set of skills that maybe somebody may not have. So it's all about everything in some ways comes down to a marketing problem. How are you going to market yourself, not only for a job, but for a visa? Because it is about presenting yourself in a certain way. And so if you do want to move to Italy and you don't have the legal right to, then getting a degree before coming could make a difference. But getting a visa to be able to come to Italy to study, that's a different situation and may actually be the easiest thing to do and may actually look better later on when you're trying to stay here. But it doesn't guarantee you the ability to stay here. Because if you want to then get Italian citizenship later, you have to be a legal resident of Italy for another 10 years on top of your student visa. So that's going to be something that's a bit tricky. I have heard of people who've been able to get their student time here marked down as residency time, but I've heard of people that have said that this is absolutely not possible, and from everything I've seen, that's the way it seems to be. So I don't know how those other people have done it, but I wouldn't count on it personally. Normally when I cut my own hair, it's a lot faster than this, but because I'm trying to focus on a couple of things here at the same time, it's going a little bit slower than usual. But what would be the best thing for an individual will come down to their own specific needs. So talking specifically about stresa, I can't say that would be maybe the best choice for most people, unless maybe somehow you're able to live off of funds from your parents. But for most people, that's not the case. So if you're trying to actually make, I believe Ben put it as a financially sustainable life, Italy's not the place to come if you're looking to make your wealth, to build your wealth, to build this large empire necessarily. Is it impossible? No, but it is not necessarily the first place to think about if you're looking to start getting really comfy and cushy. But is the quality of life here better than many other places where that is possible? Without a doubt, that is the case. I would say that even as of now, under this horrible situation, and based on how things were before all of this, but we don't know how the world will look once this is all done. So you'll have to take everything that I'm saying in this video with a grain of salt. Do I think that things will get back to some form of normalcy? Of course. What that new form of normal may come to look like will be the real question. Oh, and by the way, there have been a few of you who've asked for when I keep a beard, how do I get the lines so just exact? Straight edge razor makes a world of a difference, but I still do use like a normal kind of just disposable razor for down here, just because when you start getting by the blood vessels down here, a little bit more vital. So I only do detail work up there with a straight edge. But especially for somebody who is so young and at a time where we really don't know what's going on, I think it's an okay time to maybe stay back and kind of chill out for a little bit and put things on hold, because when we're 18, we're thinking, okay, we're ready to get started, we're ready for all of this. But if you wait a couple of years, you realize that really at that age, you were just a kid at that point. And 10 years on down from that point, even though at that time you thought you were all big, grown up, and like you really can handle things, you really see where you were 10 years before. And I am saying that from personal experience, 10 years on from where I was 10 years ago. You grow up a lot in that time, especially from 18 till 28, there is a big difference. So of course, as always, I'm not saying what is the best thing that you should do. These are just some of my opinions as somebody who's lived in a couple of countries and now here in Italy. So I hope that this video has been helpful in some way. In education, I'm not the first person that will say going to school is actually the best idea. I am very skeptical of going to university, and for a lot of fields, because there are so many fields, especially in the creative fields, where going to university, you will make a lot of connections there. But with so many people not going into the fields that they've studied, especially for video, that's one thing that, like, when I was more in my videography business, I used to have people, like kids, saying like, hey, I want to get into that, what do I need to do? It depends on what you're wanting to do in that field. If you're wanting to put in a lot of hard work and work your way up, you can start doing that at a much earlier stage if you don't go to school than if you do go to school. But for certain types of jobs, maybe if you want to work at a television station or if you want to teach, having a degree may be necessary. Anyway, that's it for this time. Maybe at least a few of you enjoyed this video, or at least found it helpful. And if you did, please be sure to subscribe. And thank you so much to those of you who have been helping to make videos like this possible and helping to let this project continue here on YouTube. I'm really trying to put as much of myself and my time into this as I can, and you guys are really letting me do this in a way that you don't even realize. So thank you so much. Of course, as always, I'm Rafael di Furia, and I will see you all next time. Later.